There's a sound a man can't forget when silver hits rough wood. Not at a poker table, not in a saloon, but in a barn where a girl's tied up and nobody blinks. That ring gets inside your head. Elko County, Nevada. Summer of '88. The heat sat on the valley like a heavy drunk. The barn timbers groaned under sweat and quiet. They called it an unclaimed bride auction. If that doesn't twist your guts, nothing will. Caroline was the fifth up that morning, 19, shoulders scraped, knees busted. Her dress, if it still counted, looked like it had crossed fire twice. Collar yellowed, hem torn. One cheek purple, the other washed out with the last bit of hope. She didn't cry. She stood still, calm like a match that hadn't been struck yet but could light a blaze in a blink. Men leaned on rails, eyes sharp as wolves at lambing time. A few whistled. A few hissed. Most said nothing, just waited to see how cheap a soul might sell. The caller lifted his hand. Final call. Gentle, virgin stock. Ready and willing. Laughter answered, hard and mean, the kind that sticks to you. Then, clink, clink, clink. 3 silver coins tapped the crate from the back. A man stepped out. Not young, mid-40s, maybe. Dust on his collar, sweat at his neck, quiet in his stare. No grin, no leer, no hungry look at her. He walked straight up, dropped the coins in the man's palm like they burned, and said low and plain, not claiming her, "I'm shutting the wolves up." Everything stopped. Even the auctioneer lost his voice. The horses went still. That kind of silence belongs to a certain kind of man, the kind who doesn't buy women, the kind who buys back a piece of dignity where it's been bankrupt for years. And out here, dignity costs more than most are willing to pay. No one spoke on the ride out. The wagon rattled, one wheel wobbling like it might quit any second. Dust trailed them like the past always does. Caroline sat rigid, wrapped in his coat. It smelled like leather, sweat, and pine, but mostly it smelled like not afraid, and that was new. She didn't ask where they were headed. He didn't offer. He held the reins like he'd done it his whole life, quiet as a fence post. When the wind slapped the canvas, she flinched. He said nothing, only eased the team down a touch like he understood. They rolled past scrub and dry creek scars until the trail climbed. That's when she saw it, a small cabin tucked between 2 ridge lines. Roof sagging, chimney tilted like a tired old man, but smoke climbed slowly and steady, like maybe the world hadn't ended after all. He dropped down first. Didn't offer a hand. Just said, "It's warm inside. Come in or don't. Your call." That right there was the strangest sentence she'd heard in a long time. Inside, the warmth wasn't only the fire, it was the quiet. It smelled of pine and old bread. 2 plates sat on a rough table. Nothing fancy, soup and bread, but both were full, like he'd already counted her in. Still wrapped in his coat, she asked, "What now?" He kept slicing. "Now you breathe." It was the gentlest order she'd ever received. He didn't ask about the bruises. Didn't ask her name. Didn't ask anything. He slid a spoon her way. That night she didn't curl by the hearth. She chose the bed. Not because he told her to. Because for the first time, the choice was hers. The wind shifted a hair that day. Jessie noticed first, the chimney smoke didn't curl like usual. It climbed fast, as if pushed. Neither said a thing. Caroline had just braided her hair and was peeling apples. Jessie whittled something for Caleb, the boy who'd taken to her like she'd always belonged. But peace doesn't last forever. It gives just enough time for you to set your guard down. Right before everything turned, there was the small pause that keeps stories breathing. Then a hit. Not a shout. Not a hoofbeat. A smell. Smoke, thick and bitter. Then the crack. Not firewood, gunpowder. The back wall shuddered. Flames climbed the corner where her ruined dress hung. Jessie sprang up. Caroline out. Too late. Through the smoke stepped Mason Griggs, silver teeth, hate in his gut, the same man who'd put Caroline on that block, who whispered to bidders, made the rules, told the jokes. He'd come to collect what he thought was his. 2 men seized her from behind. She kicked and cried out. Jessie lunged and caught a rifle, but in the ribs. He dropped. Blood bloomed on his shirt like a rose in hell. "Think you can steal from me?" Mason hissed. Caroline didn't sob, and she didn't thrash long, not because she was weak, but because she remembered what Jesse told her the first night. You don't belong to them, and you don't belong to me. You better figure out who you belong to. They dragged her through the smoke. Behind her the cabin crackled and then roared. Minutes erased everything they'd built. But Jesse wasn't dead, and Caroline wasn't finished. If you're still with me, this trail is only heating up. That man isn't done fighting. That girl isn't done choosing. If you want grit without glitter, hit subscribe. More fires coming. The path Jesse took was dry, split, and mean. The sun beat down like it had a score to settle. He moved slowly, not by choice. Every rib shouted, but purpose burned hotter. He wasn't going back to what was left. He was going through whatever stood in the way. Mason hadn't hidden Caroline. He wanted Jesse to follow. This wasn't only revenge, it was bait. Jesse knew it. But he wouldn't give the man the win by staying away. A small shadow kept close behind. Caleb. The boy hadn't said a word since the blaze, but when Jesse staggered, he brought water, then his arm, then his boots. Now, he refused to stay home. They found a half-burned wagon at the field's edge, hitched what they could, and hauled along just enough rope, and just enough hope. Miles away, Caroline wasn't chained anymore. Mason had counted her out once. She wouldn't let him twice. She found a glass shard by the wall, sawed the rope until her wrists were raw and the knot sighed. Then she sat in the dim, reading every seam in the door, every echo in the boards, every weak spot. She wasn't waiting for Jesse to carry all the savings. They would finish this together, or not at all. When the wagon creaked into view of the ghost barn Mason picked, Jesse halted. The wind held its breath. For a heartbeat, the whole world waited. Jesse looked at Caleb. "Stay low," he said. The boy nodded, jaw tight like a grown man. Jesse stepped off and walked into the lion's mouth. Before the last step, take a breath. These stories keep going, because you do. Inside, the place smelled like dust and old blood. Mason stood with his back to the door, shotgun ready, sure of his ending. He didn't see Caroline slide from shadow to beam. Didn't hear bare feet whisper over boards. Didn't read her eyes, not scared, not mad, just done. Jesse came in slow. No gun in hand, no fancy plan, just heart. Mason lifted the barrel. The second he did, Caroline moved. A sharp crack of wood, a jerk of rope, and Mason hit the floor, choking on shock. He tried to crawl, one hand dragging, the other grabbing air. His silver teeth flashed once in the light. Not a grin, a grimace. Caroline stood over him, silent. Jesse didn't stop her. This wasn't about mercy now. This was about ending the echo. They didn't speak. They didn't cheer. Pain didn't vanish. The past didn't melt. But the power shifted. Jesse knelt beside him, breathing hard. "You wanted her weak," he said. "Turns out she was waiting for her moment. They didn't kill Mason. I didn't need to. By the time the town drifted in, he was tied to the same post where he once sold girls. Let the whole place decide what came next. Justice changes shape when the truth stands in the open." That night, at the ashes of the old cabin, Caroline stood with her hands free and her back straight. Not just safe, sovereign. Jesse didn't ask her to stay. He didn't try to hold what was never his. He stood beside her, quiet, like a man who knows when to step back and when to stand firm. They rebuilt not only a roof, but a way to live, with real lines, with choice, with no more debt pretending to be love. Maybe that's the lesson. Maybe freedom isn't handed over. Maybe it's taken back, piece by piece, by those brave enough to believe they still deserve it. So let me ask you, have you stood at the edge of your own life and thought, maybe I'm not meant to survive this? Have you let someone else shout your worth louder than your own voice? If so, what would it take to claim it back? If this story stirred anything, a memory, a tear, or just a spark of heat, tap like. Subscribe if you haven't. There are more tales like this. The West wasn't only gunfights and outlaws. It was people learning to stand after being pushed and choosing again and again not to be sold. The road Jesse chose was mean, split, and sunbaked. Heat hammered him like it had a personal grudge. He moved carefully, not because he wanted to, because every breath scraped his ribs raw. He wasn't limping back to the ashes. He was pushing through whatever stood between him and Caroline. Mason hadn't dragged her off to hide. He wanted Jesse to bite. This wasn't only payback. It was a trap. Jesse knew it and went anyway. A small shadow trailed him close. Caleb. Since the flames, the boy hadn't spoken much. When Jesse folded to a knee, Caleb was there with a cup, then a steady arm, then boots laced tight. He refused to be sent home. They found a half-burned wagon by the black edge of a field, hitched what they could salvage, and rolled forward with a coil of rope and a thin spine of hope. Far off, Caroline's wrists weren't bound anymore. Mason had misjudged her once. He wouldn't get a second shot. She found a wedge of broken glass by the wall and sawed till her skin screamed and the fibers gave. In the dim, she mapped every squeak of the door, every bad board, every echo that might cover a step. She wasn't waiting to be rescued. If this ended, it would end side by side or not at all. When the wagon's tired rattle crept into the yard of the dead barn Mason had picked, Jesse held up a hand. The wind paused like it was listening. For a breath, the world went still. He looked at Caleb. "Keep low," he said. The boy nodded, jaw set strong as iron. Jesse dropped off the wagon and walked straight into the lion's mouth, slow and sure. Inside, the barn stank of dust and old copper. Mason stood with his back to the doorway, shotgun ready, wearing the smug look of a man who thinks the last page is already written. He didn't catch Caroline sliding from shadow to beam. He didn't hear the soft brush of her bare feet against warped planks. He didn't see the decision in her eyes, not fear, not fury, just the end of giving in. Jesse stepped forward, empty hands, no clever plan, only the kind of courage that comes when you have nothing left to trade. Mason lifted the barrel. The heartbeat he did, Caroline moved. Wood cracked, rope snapped, and the big man hit the floor, choking on surprise. He clawed forward, one hand dragging tracks through the dust, the other grabbing at nothing. His silver teeth flashed once, not grinning anymore. Caroline stood over him, quiet and steady. Jesse didn't step in. Mercy wasn't the lesson. Ending the echo was. No cheers, no speeches, just the shift you feel in your bones when the power goes back where it belongs. Jesse crouched, breath rough. "You wanted her small," he said. Turns out she was just waiting. They didn't kill Mason. They didn't have to. By the time the town drifted in from the road, he was tied to the very post he'd used to sell girls, like livestock. Let the folks stare at the truth they'd stepped around. Justice looks different when the whole mess sits in daylight. That evening, where the cabin had stood, embers glowed like a low red heartbeat. Caroline faced the ruin with her shoulders level and her hands unbound. She wasn't simply safe, she was sovereign. Jesse didn't ask her to stay, didn't try to claim what was never his. He stood at her side like a man who knows the difference between guarding and owning, between holding and holding back. They rebuilt slowly, not just walls and a roof, but a way to live. Fences with real lines, a table set with 2 plates because both choices mattered, and a door that opened because trust had a key this time. They kept the debt out. They kept the lies out. They kept the kind of love that calls itself payment far, far away. Maybe that's the truth the West keeps teaching. Freedom isn't handed out like rations. It's taken back, piece by people stubborn enough to believe they still deserve it, even after the world told them they didn't. So I'll ask you straight, have you ever stood on the edge of your own life and thought, maybe I won't make it through? Have you let louder voices measure your worth while you stayed quiet? If so, what would it take to pull your voice back into your chest and lock it in there for good? If this hit a nerve, stirred a memory, brought heat to your ribs, or made your throat tight, drop a like so others can find it. Subscribe if you haven't yet. There are more dust road reckonings ahead. The West wasn't only gun smoke and wanted posters. It was people learning to get up after they'd been thrown down, choosing again and again not to be traded, not to be silenced, and never to be owned.